Hi, grade 3. So we're going to begin a novel study. Now I know it's close to the end of the school year, but I really wanted to do this novel study with you. So we're going to do it. Now it's mostly just going to involve reading. I won't be expecting you to do a lot of work for this. Just 1 or 2 questions for every day of reading. So not a lot. And we're finished our phonics. So this will just be instead of phonics. Right? And like I said, not too much work. Now what I'm going to do is I'll just read the chapter or chapters. Sometimes we'll do 2 chapters. You can follow along in your book as I'm reading, or if you would rather read it on your own without me reading it, you can do it that way as well. Whatever works best for you. So the book that we are going to do is called Charlotte's Web. You may have seen the movie, but I'm one of those people that says the book is, I think, always better. It's always good to read the book as well. And if you haven't seen the movie, that's great too. You don't have to see it. So this is a book written by somebody called E.B. White. Now I see a bunch of characters on the front here already. We see a girl, we see a pig, we see a sheep, we see a goose, and there's a spider. So we're going to see what all of these characters have to do with the book. Today we're just going to read chapter 1. Next time we're going to read chapters 2 and 3 in one time. Okay, so chapter 1 of Charlotte's Web. Now every time that, like I said, there will be 1 or 2 questions. The question for today is I would like you to tell me a little bit about the setting. Remember that setting tells us about where something happened, right? So what it looked like, what was there, what time of the year it was, kind of where the story takes place. So that if I close my eyes, I can sort of picture where the story happens and who's there, right? And what it looks like there. So as we're reading, we keep that in mind a little bit, the setting. Chapter 1 is called Before Breakfast. I'll just keep my book down so that I can see the words, and I'll read, and you can just follow along in your book. So chapter 1, Before Breakfast. "Where's Pa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. "Out to the hog house," replied Mrs. Arable. "Some pigs were born last night." "I don't see why he needs an axe," continued Fern, who was only 8. "Well," said her mother, "one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it." "Do away with it?" shrieked Fern. "You mean kill it, just because it's smaller than the others?" Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. "Don't yell, Fern," she said. "Your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway." Fern pushed a chair out of the way and ran outdoors. The grass was wet and the earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers, her runners, were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. "Please don't kill it," she sobbed. "It's unfair." Mr. Arable stopped walking. "Fern," he said gently, "you will have to learn to control yourself." "Control myself!" yelled Fern. "This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself?" Tears ran down her cheeks, and she took hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hand. "Fern," said Mr. Arable, "I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now run along." "But it's unfair," cried Fern. "The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? If I had been born very small at birth, would you have killed me?" Mr. Arable smiled. "Certainly not," he said, looking down at his daughter with love. "But this is different. A little girl is one thing, and a little runty pig is another." "I see no difference," replied Fern, still hanging on to the axe. "This is the most terrible case of injustice I ever heard of." A queer look came over John Arable's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. "All right," he said. "You go back to the house and I will bring the runt when I come in. I'll let you start on it on a bottle, like a baby. Then you'll see what trouble a pig can be." When Mr. Arable returned to the house half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. Fern was upstairs changing her sneakers. The kitchen table was set for breakfast, and the room smelled of coffee, bacon, damp plaster, and wood smoke from the stove. Put it on her chair," said Mrs. Arable. Mr. Arable set the carton down at Fern's place. Then he walked to the sink and washed his hands and dried them on the roller towel. Fern came slowly down the stairs. Her eyes were red from crying. As she approached her chair, the carton wobbled, and there was a scratching noise. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid of the carton. There, inside, looking up at her, was the newborn pig. It was a white one. The morning light shone through its ears, turning them pink. "He's yours," said Mr. Arable, "saved from an untimely death. And may I be forgiven for this foolishness." Fern couldn't take her eyes off the tiny pig. "Oh," she whispered, "oh, look at him. He's absolutely perfect." She closed the carton carefully. First she kissed her father, then she kissed her mother. Then she opened the lid again, lifting the pig out, and held it against her cheek. At this moment her brother Avery came into the room. Avery was 10. He was heavily armed, an air rifle in one hand and a wooden dagger in the other. "What's that?" he demanded. "What's Fern got?" "She's got a guest for breakfast," said Mrs. Arable. "Wash your hands and face, Avery." "Let's see it," said Avery, setting his gun down. "You call that miserable thing a pig? That's a fine specimen of a pig. It's no bigger than a white rat." "Wash up and eat your breakfast, Avery," said his mother. "The school bus will be along in half an hour." "Can I have a pig too, Pop?" asked Avery. "Nope, I only distribute pigs to early risers," said Mr. Arable. Fern was up at daylight, trying to rid the world of injustice. As a result, she now has a pig. A small one, to be sure, but nevertheless a pig. It just shows what can happen if a person gets out of bed promptly. Let's eat. But Fern couldn't eat until her pig had a drink of milk. Mrs. Arable found a baby's nursing bottle and a rubber nipple. She poured warm milk into the bottle, fitted the nipple over the top, and handed it to Fern. "Give him his breakfast," she said. A minute later, Fern was seated on the floor in the corner of the kitchen with her infant between her knees, teaching it to suck from the bottle. The pig, although tiny, had a good appetite and caught on quickly. The school bus honked from the road. "Run!" commanded Mrs. Arable, taking the pig from Fern and slipping a donut into her hand. Avery grabbed his gun and another donut. The children ran out to the road and climbed into the bus. Fern took no notice of the others in the bus. She just sat and stared out the window, thinking what a blissful world it was and how lucky she was to have entire charge of a pig. By the time the bus reached school, Fern had named her pet, selecting the most beautiful name she could think of. "Its name is Wilbur," she whispered to herself. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, "Fern, what's the capital of Pennsylvania?" "Wilbur," replied Fern dreamily. The pupils giggled. Fern blushed. So that's chapter 1. Next time we'll read chapter 2 and 3 together. So your question, right, for today, you can answer it in your writing scribbler. The question is, what is the setting of the chapter, right? How does the book start? So tell me a little bit about what it looks like, who's there. You know, it's a farm. What else can you tell me? What season is it? What else happens in this first chapter? Okay, so who is there? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What are some things they smelled in this chapter? Right? With our senses. Describe the chapter sort of with your senses. I'd say about how many sentences? 8 sentences. You can easily do that. 8 sentences. Capitals and periods, just in your writing scribbler. And then that'll be it for that chapter. And we'll see you for chapters 2 and 3 next time.